Hey everyone, Adam here, So Is Your Podcast. Sorry about the horror movie lighting, I'm a little bit displaced right now, but I didn't want to wait any longer on getting this awesome interview out to you. I got to sit down with Taylor Gray. We were talking about a new movie he's in called Night Night. It's this cool psychological thriller. You should definitely check it out. It's out now. It's Nikki Koss's directorial debut. There's a lot of moving parts in this, and it all came together really well. It's a really tense psychological thriller, like I said. And I like those kind of horror movies or thrillers way better than the slasher thing or the torture porn or the hostile genres. The psychological stuff always hits so much harder. So definitely check out Night Night. Available now, theaters and VOD. So, check your local listings. We shall be supporting theaters now, but it's also on VOD if you're not near a theater that's playing it. Something else that was really cool about being able to talk to Taylor is he is very well known for playing Ezra in the Star Wars universe. I was really psyched to talk to him about it, and I tried not to gush too much. I was a big fan of Rebels, big fan of the Clone Wars. I'm hoping we see more of Ezra going forward. I didn't pester him about that. I'm sure he's sick to death of that question, but we did have to dive into a little bit of Star Wars talk. This is So Wizard Podcast after all. Taylor was a really cool guy. He was very happy to talk Star Wars. He was very happy to talk Night Night. So check out the interview and enjoy. Hey everyone, Adam here, So Wizard Podcast. I'm sitting down with Taylor Gray to talk about his newest movie, Night Night. How you doing, Taylor?
Hi, I'm doing really well. Thanks for having me.
Definitely. Thanks for coming on. Once again, I appreciate your patience in the schedule. Things got a little bit crazy, so it's cool that we got to do this.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to it. I'm glad it all worked out.
Absolutely. Before we get to Night Night, I always like to ask creative people, kind of what was your spark and where did you get started?
I started fairly young, actually. I think the first film I did, I was 13. And I kind of got the bug then. I jumped into a bunch of acting studios and I started learning the craft. And I think after that first film, I really sort of dedicated myself to this. And I was like, if this is a job and I can see this through as a career, then there's nothing else I would rather do. And I haven't really looked back since. And I love it so much.
That's awesome that you knew what you wanted to do at 13 because, a lot of people are still figuring it out into their 30s and 40s.
It's fair. Yeah. I have a brother and we talk about it all the time. And he's like, yeah, I still don't know what exactly I want to do. He's like, I know what I don't want to do, but I think that's more common than not. And so I feel very fortunate to like have found something that I love and found it at a younger age because I definitely had to learn the ropes through those like teenage years with it.
Yeah, for sure. Because you got a lot to navigate in those early teenage years, so to navigate a career also.
Yeah, exactly. You're just worried about going to high school and not being too strange.
Right. So were you born was like the entertainment industry any part of your family, or did you just watch a movie and you're like, well, they can do it, why can't I?
Maybe somewhere in the middle. So no one in my family's in it. And I think that's why my family was a little hesitant. At first, my parents were so supportive and they've been so cool. But like, I remember my grandmother when I was young was like, are you sure you want to do that? Like, that seems like a big risk. I've no one in my family who's in it, but by proximity, I grew up in Orange County, which is fairly close to Los Angeles. And so that's how I started doing gigs. I actually started with commercials. I had a friend that wasn't an actor. I actually didn't know anyone who was an actor at the time, but they were doing a commercial at this local amusement park. And I went along with my buddy just to like ride rides. They were shutting the park down. So I went to just go ride some rides. And they were like, all you have to do is shoot for an hour and you get to stay at this park all day long. I was like, that's a great deal.
Yeah, it's a no-brainer.
When I was there, the director, I had no aspirations of acting at this time, bear in mind. I literally just went to like, they said, all you're going to do is ride a ride, smile, and then you can ride all the rides all day long. And it's a place called Knott's Berry Farm that's down here close to my home. And we went, and the director kind of pulled me aside. I was like, hey, you seem to have a little knack for this. Would you want to like kind of pursue it? And I was like, I don't really know. And he's like, well, let me introduce you to an agent. And from there, I started doing a couple commercials. And like I said, I kind of got the bug. And I was like, I think I want to do this. And once I got into acting classes and saw what the job was, I've been in love since.
That's really cool how it kind of fell into your lap in a way. I mean, I'm sure you've had the actor struggles where it feels like it's never going to catch on. Or you're doing all these crazy auditions and driving all over the place. I'm sure you've had that part of the story too, but Just your beginning. It's
Yeah,
cool how it kind of. Sorry.
it's true. It's true. And like you said, everyone does go through those different struggles. And I was fortunate to start working fairly young. And then while I was auditioning for commercials, that would be like every day driving up to LA. I remember like I would even take money from gigs that I would make, and I would like I would have to pay for rides to get up to LA because my parents worked. And so it was definitely during that time I was like, is this worth it? Like I would have to come out of school early and go up there, but I knew what the goal was ultimately. And then I think when I was 15 or 16, I booked a Nickelodeon show. And so that kind of changed everything a bit because then I was working full time and I had to like leave school permanently. And I did my school with like a teacher on set. And that was when everything sort of changed, where you started like the challenges were still there. They just changed, right? Like there were new things that you were concerned about and just trying to navigate the new waters.
I would have to imagine as a kid working for such a kid-friendly company that you really felt like you got to that next level.
Yeah, I've talked to some people about like when you're an actor, like you just want to tell stories, right? Like ultimately that's the goal. And when you're younger, the only real opportunities to be the lead of a show were on Nickelodeon and Disney. There really weren't other networks like ABC, NBC, AMC, whatever the channel might be. They're usually adult leads, at least like younger adults. You know what I mean? And so to be able to like play a protagonist in a story, in a series, that was really the best opportunity to do it. And I think a lot of younger actors, that's what you were sort of hoping to land. So it was really cool because, like I said, like I just learned so much just kind of trial by fire, right? Like I just went through it every day, not really sure what was happening, but like I was working on a sitcom and it was a good time. And we worked in front of a live audience. And so there were a lot of different moving parts to it, but it was such a fun, enjoyable time. I loved it.
Yeah, that really is trial by fire. Your first sitcom and in front of a live audience.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it's almost like the elephant in the room, at least on my end. But you got to work with Disney at one point. You mentioned Nickelodeon and Disney for the leads, and you were the lead in a series. So I'll try not to like fanboy on you, but you were in Star Wars Rebels.
That's right. That job was amazing. That was the first voiceover job and only voiceover job. Or no, I did one episode of She-Ra as well, but really that's the only voiceover work I'd done. And I think that was the first voiceover audition I ever had. And I did not know it was Star Wars when I was auditioning, and I'm glad that no one told me because that probably would have thrown me off, to be honest. But
Put the pressure on.
that talk about another learning curve. Because when your training is like theater and on camera, it is a little bit different because you don't have all the same faculties to use to emote. It's all coming through your voice. And so doing that show, it was just amazing to be a part of like the Lucasfilm family and to work on Star Wars. Like it's the coolest galaxy in the world. I mean, it literally is a pillar of cinema. You know what I mean? The way like the Beatles are a pillar of music. I feel like Star Wars, that franchise represents something similar. And I was unaware when I started the show, probably just naively, but I've grown to see how amazing that sort of fan base and community is.
Absolutely, yeah, and it being a pillar, I think you're right on, and also the whole Clone Wars into Rebels combo. For a lot of people, that was or is their Star Wars. You know, depending on your age, you had a different entry point into it, and those two for sure are, you know, those are pillars in the Disney or the Star Wars universe. So it's really cool that you got that experience.
Yeah, Dave Filoni, who is such a great creator, writer, director, just creative storyteller. That was something he said right at the beginning. He was like, he kind of pulled us into a room at the very beginning. Was like, hey, this is the next step of Star Wars, and this is canon, and we're telling a story that ties in with everything that has happened in the franchise. And I just want you guys to be aware of that, have fun with it. But like some people, this will be the first thing they see in Star Wars. And like obviously you laugh to yourself because you're like, is that true? But then he was so right because we'd go out to conventions, which ended up being the coolest thing. Like when the show premiered, we went to San Diego Comic-Con. They had this sort of premiere unveiling thing. And then I went to a few conventions later on and I would speak to people. at these events. And it was really, really cool when people would come up and they would be like, "Hey, I've been a fan of Star Wars since '77 when the first movie came out. And my son, his first Star Wars is Rebels." And so he's like, "It's so cool to have had my first experience with it and then watch him have his first experience and basically blend it all together." And that's the type of stuff that makes you just love what you're doing. And you have a responsibility with it to just do the best job you can, which I think is amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's incredible. I can't even ask enough questions about the experience because you've lived it. There's no way I can absorb that. It's just so awesome.
It's so fun. And yeah, I'm so grateful to Lucasfilm and Star Wars. Such a cool character and storyline, and to be able to develop him over, I don't, it was something like 80 to 100 episodes. That we really got to develop a character. Whereas like other shows I've been on, they've gone maybe a season or two, but then they're canceled. And like the development over that is fairly short, right? And
Mhm.
in a film, you can only develop a character for an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours. You know what I mean? So with something like Rebels, Ezra really, really transformed and evolved from like this young, street smart kid with this innate ability to a Padawan too. By the end of it, a pretty formidable Jedi.
Yeah, it's absolutely right, and it's also cool that you got to kind of revisit the character in. I don't want to say offshoots because that makes it sound smaller, but like you did a video game, and then you went into the sequel Star Wars Resistance.
Yeah, yeah, it was cool because it goes to show how Star Wars is so interconnected and how when it is canon, like it really is in the world, right? So it's going to show up different places, and I think it's so cool.
Yeah, and that's awesome. I could keep you here all day going on about Rebels. Well, actually, I do want to ask a little bit about the work side of it. Did you enjoy the voice acting aspect?
I did. It was definitely it was great practice on just I've done voice classes obviously in school for acting, but not in the way that was, right? Where you you would play a character and emote, but only your voice was really going to go into it because they were going to animate afterwards. And so it was definitely nice to be able to do an entire episode in a day or two, whereas any other show you have to shoot for a week at least, right? And you have to sit through hair and makeup, and then there's downtime while the cameras turn, and there's a lot of waiting. Whereas with Rebels, we kind of banged it out. They had two or three cameras set up on every actor, and everyone was together as well, which they told me is a precedent set by George Lucas with when they were doing Clone Wars, that they wanted basically all the actors in the room. And because it was my first voice acting gig, I just assumed that's how it always was. But what I learned from people like Steve Bloom and Vanessa Marshall, who've been in, I mean, it seems like every animated project
Right.
under the sun, they said that they were like, "Oh, we're so fortunate that we're all together because normally you just go in by yourself, bang out your lines, and you don't have anyone reading with you." So with Rebels, like we were all bouncing around, and I feel like with that show in particular, you can feel that energy. It's palpable. The banter between us, especially with that ghost crew, there's something really nice about the sort of dynamic we have. And I think a lot of that is owed to being in the room and kind of creating that together.
I love that you got to do it that way because that was going to be my very next question is did you have to just go in alone and they say, well, in this scene you're sad and you have no context for it. It's awesome you got to play off each other.
Yeah. And it feels like that would be the only way to do it. But I've heard now that they like when we did the video game, that one, you went in by yourself. And it's true. Like it was not nearly as fun as recording as a cast because that felt like we were actually just shooting the show, right? But doing
Mhm.
the video game, I think it was like a 5, 6, 7 hour session, and you're by yourself, and they have just a kind of laundry list of lines because in a video game it's like all the different possibilities. Like, well, if you open this door and then this, well, then it's like, hey, look at that, or this. And so you just say every different thing, like three different variations of it, and then move to the next one. And so that one is a little more exhausting, little less sort of in the world. You know what I mean?
Yeah, kind of more just doing the work. Yeah.
Yeah.
I get it. That's great you had that experience because I would have to imagine that's not the norm, especially given COVID and everything, they're probably just having people record in a bubble and.
Oh, true. Yeah. Well, actually, I've been hearing that people have been recording like in booths at home, and so it really uh, it puts a responsibility on an actor to be like, oh yeah, I'll set up a home studio so that they can record. And I have friends who have that, and they're working every day just because like they can work through COVID.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Like I started to say before, I could keep you here all day just talking Star Wars. Maybe we'll have to do that sometime, but you have a new movie coming out, which looks really cool and a totally different genre and feel than Star Wars Rebels. How did Night Night come across your desk?
Night Night. Let's see. I got an audition or like a request for a role of the main role is April Davis, played by Brenna D'Amico, and the role I end up playing is her brother Jax Davis. But there's another role in the film, Robert, who is sort of an antagonist, if you will. And I had been sent the script and sides for that just through my agent. I think I have a mutual agent with the director, Nikki Koss, or we did. And I read the script, and I just had a feeling. I was like, I feel like this other character suits me better. I haven't played a character like that yet, and so I was really interested in that. So I just kind of, which I don't normally do, I just took the script. Normally, you would audition with the sides that are sent to you, but since I didn't want to read for that character, I just kind of picked out a couple scenes of this other character, Jax, that I kind of gelled with, and I taped it and sent it into them. And the producers wrote back and they were like, "Oh, wow, that was strange. We like it, but will you actually audition with the real sides for Jax?" And I was like, "Sure." So they sent me what they had sent everyone who was reading for the Jax character, and I sent in a tape. And 2 weeks later, I was in Texas with them shooting the film, and I had such a blast. The character is very fun, interesting. Like I said, different than any character I've ever played. He's a very hedonistic person, a bit selfish, lives a fairly like Epicurean lifestyle, very concerned with like who he's going to end up with that night and what stimulants may come across that during the day.
Okay. So that sounds like a cool, maybe villain's too strong, but a cool of that kind of darker character that you get to just have fun with.
Exactly. And I figured like within this genre, you got to send it and you have to go for it. So it was fun to play a character that was different, like especially different than a character like Ezra or on the sitcom, you know what I mean? So it was a good time and I had a blast, and I hadn't really worked on a thriller. I done like a horror, but not really in this genre. And so it was really cool to do something that is like a psychological thriller.
Yeah, it does look very psychological, which is cool. And those are the ones like as far as a horror movie goes, I prefer that to like the slasher stuff. So
I'm in the same boat. Some of the stuff that gets too gory, it's just not for me. I can see the appeal and why it has become such a big genre, but I find myself looking away too often.
I just get more enjoyment out of it, kind of messing with your head because it's
Yeah,
scary, intense, but you're also like in for the ride because you're like, okay, what's real, what's not, what's going on. So that's cool that you got to do
exactly.
that. When you do a movie like this, are you given the full? Well, I guess it would be case to case. So for Night Night, were you given the full script and you saw how everything unfolded, or would you kind of show up and do it scene by scene?
Yeah, so I was sent the whole script. I was sent the whole script early on. And every project, you're right, it kind of depends. Sometimes they won't let out the entire script, but with this one, I think that's a part of like taking on a project as well, as you want to know what the whole picture is and how you can serve the story best. But just going back to Star Wars real quick, every project they would send the full script except for Rebels. Um, Dave Filoni, that's the beauty of that man. He wouldn't always give us the entire script. So throughout the course of the seasons, I think I had every single script except for the finale 2 episodes. He only gave you what scenes you were in. So like the monologue at the very end where you kind of find out all these different things like Hera had a child and whatnot. Spoiler alert, but I feel like that's safe.
I think if
um,
people are subscribed to So Wizard podcast, they've seen it.
yeah, I felt safe dropping that one. But I remember when we were watching that, they had a screening for the finale at this theater over at the Disney lot. I was sitting next to Vanessa Marshall, and she like grabbed my arm so hard when that happened. She's like, "What is going on?" Because none of us knew what was happening in those last few minutes. And so it was fun to kind of learn as we went, you know what I mean? And watch with an audience. But with a movie like Night Night, we had the whole script and then you just go in and shoot your scenes. But I knew what the story would be.
So you can kind of see both sides of it. You had a lot of fun discovering it with your character, but you also see the benefit to knowing where it's going so that you can lean into it for the audience.
Exactly. Because if you know there's a whole misdirect with something that involves you, but you're not in that scene, it's good to know so that you can lean into it as well. So, you know what I mean, to serve the story when an audience is watching, they think you're doing something for one reason and you're in on it, as opposed to sort of obliviously making choices as an actor.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's kind of cool because I always wonder in the thrillers, like, would it be better for the people doing the performance to be lost like the audience, or do they have to know where it's coming? Like you're saying, and I'm just kind of reiterating, but yeah.
I think both could work, right? Because if you were lost, it would add a different sort of feel where the audience would be even more thrown off. But then on the flip side of it, like knowing what's happening, you can lean into certain things that are meant to be a red herring. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Night Night doesn't seem like it's too effects heavy, but have you done a very effects heavy, like thriller kind of like thing like that?
I'm trying to think. I did one that was a like a little slasher gory bit that was a pilot that didn't end up going. But I'm trying to think of effects heavy. Um, I've done some different things where like I'm just thinking of the sitcom would be a lot of like makeup. You know what I mean? We would be doing just for the sake of jokes. You know what I mean? There would be different disguises that we would be putting on.
Okay.
But I haven't done anything that was too effects heavy, which I really would love to do. And like talking about picking projects based on like things that you haven't done and what interests you, that's something that I would love to lean into.
I was just wondering how it is as an actor when you're acting, especially in a thriller where all of the emotions are, at a height. Like very few characters in thrillers are just kind of like even keeled and playing it cool.
It's
Especially as the
true.
movie goes on. I was just wondering how that is as an actor when it's a very effects heavy thing and you're reacting to stuff that it's not like whether it's noises or effects or a straight up monster or something like that.
Yeah, it's wild. Like in this one, you're right. Like you just hit the nail on the head without even having seen it yet. Like there, every scene I have, the emotions are kind of at a 10. You know what I mean? And it is a sort of uh a daunting task, but like you are going for it and you're feeling at that level because that's what is of the genre as well. But trying to think of what you just said, like I did a film after Night Night actually that it's called High Expectations that comes out next year. I played like a professional soccer player, and when we would shoot in these stadiums, and this was during COVID. So they would bring in about 200 people as fans and they would shoot plates. So they would kind of put them around the stadium. And like, if we were shooting you, they would be behind you. So it looks like it's a full stadium behind you, but it really is only that one section. But then when they would do wide shots of you on the field, like after the game clapping to the fans, the director would come in and he's like, Taylor, the reaction here has got to be even bigger. Like you have to imagine there's going to be 30,000 people in this stadium. And I was like, oh, all right, sure. Like that, it is a trip because there are only 200 people clapping, and then maybe another 100 people of crew. So there's 300 people clapping total, and this difference in sound between that and 30,000. Like when we
Yeah.
would have to speak on the field, he's like, you have to yell because you're speaking over an entire stadium. So I haven't yet seen a cut, but I hear that they are finishing a final cut in the next 2 weeks. So I'm excited to see how that turned out as well because I'm curious. I'm curious what that's like when you're playing off of basically a green screen.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And even something like that, because you wouldn't have think that a soccer movie is very effects driven, but how do you picture what the roar of a crowd of 30,000 people is unless you've been a rock star at a stadium?
It's true though, and that's really the big task of acting is so much is imagination based as well, and pulling on things that would elicit the same sort of response in you, even if it wasn't exactly the same situation. Like w- when you're young and you maybe did like a talent show in your high school, or sorry, even like middle school, elementary school, when the scale of that emotion, it's still going to be the same nerves, whether it was 30,000 people more, even an auditorium full of 300 of your peers, that would have a similar sort of reaction, right? And so you're kind of trying to dive into that. But at the same time, yeah, I was just trying to imagine, you try and talk to people who have been in the situation. But then again, you're just trying to give it your best with what you think that would be like.
Yeah, that's cool. So going back to Night Night, you kind of did an unconventional audition, but it seems like it works out for you, so that's awesome. And you're
Yeah,
playing,
yeah, I'm glad to be a part of it.
yeah, yeah, and you're playing. I don't want to say like a slimy character, but more of an unsavory character. You were describing it as something you're not totally used to. Were you able to, or how much of yourself or going against your intuition, maybe, were you able to project into the character? Did that not make sense?
Um, I so there's a funny thing of like when you're playing. So this character, I think technically, I'm even, not even going to try to speak technically on. I don't know if it's protagonist or antagonist. He's there, and like all these events that are happening in his sister's life while she's trying to keep track of things, he can kind of see through certain things, and he's presenting information to try to help her. But because he has just come out of rehab, he's sort of an unreliable source. You know what I mean? So you're like, I think as the audience, you actually side with him a bit, where you're like, no, listen to Jax. Like he's trying to help, but because of his history and his past, people don't necessarily want to heed his advice. So it is that sort of complex situation and circumstance. But they say with every character, right? Like even a villain, they think what they're doing is right. Like, and that's everyone in our life. Even when people do things that we don't necessarily side with or enjoy, oftentimes they are doing what they think is right. You guys just, we're seeing it differently, right? And I think that happens often where as a character, you can't ever judge the character. And you know what I mean? So like when you're playing him, I'm approaching it where like he thinks he's doing all the right things, even though he might not be the most discerning person in the world, and he's making some of the wrong choices. He's doing it with a good heart ultimately. And so that was sort of how I approached this character. And the lines are going to be the lines. So it's like, what can I color the performance in with that wasn't necessarily on the page? And so that's where I'm trying to bring parts of myself or like parts of people around me. Like I always keep a journal for each character. And for this character in particular, I went back and I was looking at it because this was a year ago that we shot. And I was looking at some of the people in my life that I had written down as sort of sources for this character. And it was funny to see because some of the people wouldn't like, it wouldn't really make sense why it matches up, but it does just because there are shades of them that I thought, oh, well, this paired with the circumstance that this character is in, I think might add some depth to it.
Okay, that's really cool, and that does clear it up a lot. I think I was leaning too heavily on the fact that he was a villain, but it doesn't sound like that's completely accurate. So that was really cleared it up a lot.
Right on. Yeah, no, it's a fun character to play. And again, anytime you get to do something new or different, I think that's an enjoyable experience as an actor.
As an actor, it's kind of something that you look for career wise.
Yeah, yeah, I would say so. Just it keeps it fresh, and like you get to try on another set of clothing, you know what I mean? And you kind of dive into a different set of emotions and history.
Yeah, very cool. All right. Well, I don't want to, eat up your entire day. So why don't you tell people where they can find Night Night, where they can find you, any socials or anything else you want to plug?
Yeah, for sure. One again, thank you for having me. Night Night is out now officially in select theaters and video on demand. So like Apple, iTunes, everywhere like that. And let's see. Oh yeah, social. I'm on Instagram at Taylor Gray 3 and Twitter. I'm Taylor Gray.
Very cool. Well, Taylor, thanks again. It sounds like everything's going well. So, I wish you the best of luck going forward. Looking
Yeah,
forward to it.
thank you so much for having me on. It was really great chatting with you.
Absolutely. I'd like to thank Taylor one more time for coming on the show to talk to me about Night Knight, his career, and of course, Star Wars Rebels. Really awesome guy. I hope to get to talk to him again in the future. I'm hoping it's more about Star Wars, but this is, about Night Knight, so I should probably shut up about Star Wars. Anyway, great interview. Make sure you like and subscribe because we've got more stuff coming your way. I know things have been a little slow with the holiday season, but we're going to be picking up and bringing you a ton of new content. So make sure you like and subscribe. You're not going to want to miss out. Also, make sure you listen to So Wizard Podcast every single week wherever you get your podcasts. SoWizardPodcast.com is your resource for reviews, recommendations, videos, merchandise, and more. We love hearing feedback, so drop us a line on social media or leave a note in the comments. All of our accounts can be found after the show and in the show notes. So Wizard Podcast can also be found on Patreon, where for as little as $1 a month, you get multiple monthly bonus shows. And on a more personal note, a good friend and I have an ongoing comedy comic series. It's called Social Studies. It's a slice of life comic that looks at the high school experience, all the ridiculousness that goes along with it. We write it like a sitcom and jam it through the prism of the 90s cartoons that we grew up on and love. You can find all of that at socialstudiescomic.com. There's 7 issues available now. That's the first chapter. Chapter 2 starts in just another month. That's crazy. So, socialstudiescomic.com. Thanks.